Hello again. Nice to see you all again. Glad you're here. I wanted to remind you all, please hit the like button and subscribe and leave a comment if you will. I get to read as many comments as I can, and I try to answer quite a few of them, especially if they're questions about what I'm doing. So today I've got Angie here again, and I'm glad that she was able to be here. I want to show you a little more work today with the subtle anatomy in a little more global sense. In other words, I've broken down how you can move the arms and the legs and how you can follow that patterning. But there's times when you're working like this when the arms and legs are going to move at the same time, or you have to get a person into a ball, or you have to stretch them out because they're moving this emotional stuff through their body and out of the tissues. So it requires a lot more work in lifting and moving and bending and all that kind of stuff. So I want to show you how that works. So I don't really know how it's going to work with her body because we're going to connect into the emotional part and just kind of see where that will take us. And it'll be a modified thing. It's not going to be like a real dialoguing session, but it will be modified so you can get an idea what it takes from the therapist and also from the person on the table to be able to accomplish this really good work that will clear out a lot of the emotional things that we have going on. I also wanted to say one other thing about cranial sacral work is it's very important to understand that cranial sacral work works with the endocrine system. And the endocrine system is vitally important if you're going to move forward into a spiritual walk in life. And the reason that it's like that is because the endocrine system ties so tightly in with the pituitary, the pineal, and the hypothalamus. And all those parts of the brain are important for the spiritual development. So to first of all, clear all of the emotion out as possible out of the body, get that cleared, then you can take the next step and go deeper and deeper into a true sense of spiritual walk where you're not being interfered with a body that's not functioning properly. If the body isn't functioning properly, your mind isn't going to be functioning properly, and your emotions aren't going to be functioning properly, and you're going to be off on that kind of a tangent. So anything that you're trying to do spiritually, if you don't have the ground floor cleared, it's going to be very difficult to actually maintain and see the results and the benefits and the miracles that happen when you're moving into a higher spiritual frequency of life. So with that, we'll get going. I'm starting out by going down to Angie's feet, and I'm basically looking at how she's on the table. And what I'm seeing is that there's a little bit of a vector curve from the mid-abdomen up into the neck. So there's a little bit of a curvature there, which the vector is bending. And that's taking the legs out a little bit, with this foot rotating a little bit more. So we're going to start by checking that. And I'm going to be placing my hands on the bottom of her feet just to get a feel for how the energy is flowing. Now, there's another part of this work that is really important to begin to develop, and that is how you can push energy into the body, pull it out of the body, or make it neutral. And I'm at a point where when I'm working on bodies, my arms get very, very vascular. That just pumps up with blood. And it looks really weird, but it's a vascular thing, and when I'm not working, it's not there. So it has something to do with probably the energy coming forward, but I don't really know why it happens that way. So if that starts happening to you, then just figure that you're probably pushing some energy out. I have developed to a point where I can push quite a bit of energy, even enough to influence sometimes the cranial bones to start to move, even though I don't know the direction they're going in. I can oftentimes get them to move. So now oftentimes when the hands are on the bottom of the feet like this, I'm feeling for the rhythm, and the person on the table oftentimes feels different sensations going on in their body in different locations that seem unrelated. And those little points are points of interest that should be maybe looked at by the person on the table. There was a little flutter that just happened in this foot. So now I'm going to just lift this up the legs and see very slowly how they want to move, if they want to come into any kind of an alignment here. The body takes time to get into that proper alignment because it has to recreate a new neural pathway for another muscle memory pattern. So there is something going on. So taking the energy, I'm going with neutral energy up, and I'm just going to see if I can feel what is called in cranial work an energy cyst. That's actually more, we check it more with the somato-emotional work, where there's an energy cyst. And what I feel with an energy cyst is it feels like they're like a wash machine agitator. It just kind of, it's a disturbed feel to the energy, because usually the energy is pretty smooth on a body. And part of it is from what I saw, so I'm checking over the hip, and there is something going on energetically with this energy cyst. Now, how the energy cyst is it usually finds its way down into the very subtle parts of the body. It'll start there and it works its way all the way through. So it goes through all the different bodies until it comes out into the energetic body. And that is also a disturbance as well. So there's many layers that you work with, and it's quite interesting and quite fascinating. But again, to be successful at it, you have to get yourself out of your head and stop trying to figure out what's going on, because you'll never figure it out. Rather, you want to let that hand guide and then be still with yourself until you feel it in your heart of something, and it'll come quickly. And when it does come, it's the first thing that comes into your mind as far as the area or what you're feeling, because the mind is going to want to jump in there and begin to take you into a conversation, and usually it'll confuse everything going on. But this is very strong right over this hip. So I'm just going to work on this part now. So I'm just going to rest my hand here and see where it takes me into that into the body. See how it's going to take me into the body. If it's going to push me out, if it's going to pull me in, if it's going to ask to be moved. So there I'm being led to hold on to the knee and see the connection here. And that's where I'm starting to feel a connection. Oftentimes you're not going to know why you're doing what you're doing, but you'll find different connections when you're hitting it right. And you'll get an idea of how the restriction patterning is happening in the body, which seems to be going with contralateral positioning. And then it feels like it's going up into this shoulder. Okay, so let's see what's happening here. If I lift the leg, let's see what it wants to do. So I'm going to go under the leg and then still hold this position. So here's where it gets, you have to be strong, and you have to also, as a therapist, you're going to have to use a lot of leverage, especially with heavy limbs and bigger people. And some people just carry a lot more heaviness in them because they're so loaded down with emotional problems. And somehow that translates in the body to being very heavy. So we're getting a bit of a movement pattern here. She's doing the moving. I'm just following along. If this were a dialoguing session, we would be dialoguing what's happening in this hip. But because that's not really what we want to do for this, we're just showing you how to find these things and then unwind at the more global area. Now what I'm feeling under my fingers, it isn't anything that's real solid or hard. It's just holding me there and wanting to unwind down in the socket area. Here we go. There's a little catching here. And of course, if she feels something that is moving into a hurt so bad situation, then the client should tell you, because sometimes this movement, it wants to go further, but there's something in the way and it won't be able to, or it needs to be unwound at a little bit different level.
As soon as she touched my feet, I started to relax. I didn't know I would relax so quickly. And she went right to my right leg. And that actually is an old standing problem, the right SI joint. And when she started following up my right leg, there was a little fire burning at the SI joint. So it was interesting because she had her hands on the top of my hip, but there was that fire burning in the SI at the bottom, and I thought, I wonder if she's gonna, find that. And then eventually she said, oh, I can feel it's the SI joint, and put her fingers right in that area. And I thought it was so interesting that she went contralaterally, or my body told her to do that, from the right hip over to the left ribs, which I do think I'm tighter in my left waist. And then she went to my right shoulder, and I didn't feel anything in these contralateral places she was moving. But then afterwards, I felt my right shoulder kind of burning, and I do have an old shoulder injury. So I got to hear a different way of my body talking while she was working on me. I felt it in a different way.
My foot is up here holding her foot so she can relax it all down. Here I feel a relationship between the kneecap. The knee is doing some movement, as well as the hip. So there's a connection here going on that's wanting to be aligned. And I'm getting an idea that it is also in the SI joint. There's quite a bit of movement in the hip. And so what Angie is doing is focusing in on this area, having her brain not thinking, but allowing messages, thoughts to come through. It could be anything that she's needing to address at this moment. So now I've got her foot underneath mine. And I'm not like stomping on her toes, she's more in the arch of my foot. This is a deeper unwinding than we did with her when we were demonstrating the legs. This is deeper, and it's pulling me in even deeper.
I had to close my eyes at some point because there were some movements that I could feel like I wanted to resist or help when she was really starting to move the leg. And I don't know if that's held emotions or what it was, but I had to close my eyes and work a little bit to allow that movement, and on just some of the movements. And then I've not really had my ribs moved before like that. And I really don't know how I would do that so much by myself, but it felt really good to do that.
And so we're going to cross over here with the rib cage. The ribs are rumbling a little bit. They're fluttering. I think I should use flutter rather than rumble. Watching that leg. Yeah, there's more to it going on here. I'm slipping my hand under to the SI joint and putting my fingers right in that joint between the sacrum and the ilium, and just going to hold them there because there's something else happening. There's like a pull. You can see how there's just a little arc right here with the vector. She's nice and straight here. There's just a little pull in the rib cage. So what I'm sensing that the body is wanting to do is, I'm going to cross her arm over. So I'm going underneath her chest and I'm going to roll her in a bit of an arch toward me. And let that unwind in the shoulders. Is that okay? Mm-hmm. All right, so that is a little bit of a release happened in the chest, in the rib cage. Underneath here, this is what's asking me to do, is pull this leg over. We're going to roll her into a ball here. Okay, that was to unwind that rib cage. See if we can get that roll out of there. Okay, it's straightened up. There's still something going on, so I'm just following where the lines are, wanting to release this.
There was a moment when she brought my body kind of up into a ball, and that was a moment where I could feel the energy or the emotion of fear a little bit start coming through that motion, and then coming out of it, it was released again. But so I don't know what that was, but definitely with some of the movements. I mean, what am I doing? I'm just laying there, nothing's happening, but moving the body. Where does that come from, this fear? So it makes me curious if indeed, you know, in the tissue there are held all these emotions. And when she moved the hip, there was some fear in some of those motions too, the right one. So, I mean, I'm perfectly safe. I'm just laying here, so that makes me curious and want to listen and pay attention.
So here I'm just rolling these ribs because they're very tight and they're asking for some help. Okay, we're going to hold this for a minute. Again, this work, when you're lifting somebody, you have to use, your weight to lift them, and their weight will be in you. So it seems like there's a harder pressure on them, but you're still very careful and very light as you move, following what they're doing. And under here on the rib side, there's a lot of activity. So this is where the tension is actually happening, which it wasn't showing itself at first. It was showing itself in a different way because there was things that had to be unwound before it could get to where the main issue or tension is. So there's a lot of activity right on her rib. I'm on a rib, and it's just above the floaters. And I'd say the rib is probably just right a little bit above the liver. So it's, I don't know the number of the rib. And here we have that leg rotating again. Just waiting for it to unwind and come out. This is some of the hardest stuff to teach because you can't see it, and there's a lot of activity that goes on. And what the body is asking, it's asking to get the vector back into alignment. So there must be some kind of an activity or a position that Angie gets into that creates this bit of a side bend, a little curve, a little arch of a side bend. We all have one stronger side than the other. Sometimes the organs are catching. Well, that foot has changed. The hip has changed. The vector is straight now except up into the neck, but the vector is in a straight line through the rib cage instead of being a little bit arced. But now we have just the neck to catch up with that because that has gone into a different placement. Actually, it's probably in the same placement that this was when it was off. And now that that is, yeah, the neck and the shoulder is still a little bit, but the vector through the mid part of the body is definitely straighter, and her turnout on the feet have a even turnout. So from the times that we worked on her where we got her nice and straight, this is what happens during the activity that you do throughout the week. It will take you back into the old pattern a little bit, but it's not going to be as far because it takes time for the neural pathway to come into a new muscle memory pattern. So the important thing is when you get this work done is that you be mindful that you might feel like sitting in a different position. You might feel funny, and you'll notice that certain habits that you have with the way you position your body will change.
I could feel the body was straighter, meaning it feels awkward to me. When she said there was some patterns that during the week that I must have gotten in or reverted back to. Indeed, this week my dog had hips or knee surgery, so I've been kind of in the bed with her, and I think I've been reading and doing this, like I've been supine a lot more or just in the bed a lot more than I would ever be. I'm going to watch to see if I sit differently, this coming week, if I want to hold myself differently after this work today. And I've been having to do a lot of lifting of her, carrying her 45 pounds, so maybe that's a piece of it. When she got to my head and neck, I think I fell asleep.
So now I'm going to check the head, the neck, I should say, because the neck was a little bit off the vector. This is a really nice straight vector, but the chin is, again, just a little tiny bit off. So we're going to, the shoulders are looking good. So we're going to work that neck, just find where it wants to go, to find that new vector line. There are ways that you can also work the vectors, is like mending them back, and that sometimes is how you'll have to do it along with the tissue unwinding. There's not a whole lot to unwind here because we've done the work before, so it's kind of a polishing, putting the frosting on the cake or polishing up everything. And there it went onto the line. And there the vector is better. It's right on cue. Checking the little joints in the clavicular notch around there and making sure that that's good with the arms, because we did move the arms around. All of this feels really good. There's a little movement in it, but she's holding really fairly well. The part that was really off is the part we hadn't worked on, which was the mid part, the rib cage, the back. And of course, when that's off, the feet are going to be a little off, as will the shoulders. But the alignment here is good. Okay, now I'm just going to check with, I'm going to do some energy, pushing some energy into this area. So I'm just going to hold along the rib cage here with my thumbs, and then have my hands wrap underneath right along the rib cage there. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to press, and I'm not pressing into the physical, I'm melding with the physical, and then I'm going to back out with my hands as I push energy into the rib cage and the lungs, and see if there's any deeper kind of movement that wants to correct at a deeper level, that you can pick that up energetically. And yeah, it's starting to, I can feel like I'm getting into her energy now. And there is some movement in the rib cage that it's aligning. The little ribs are finding a different position to be in. And it's just about, so it's very little movement, but it's very significant. And pushing that energy in. Checking the hip bones to see if that's, it still is calling me to the upper chest a little bit. I'm just going to be allowing my fingers to relax, but I'm lifting my hand up as if it's like the table resting up in it, to see if I can get these muscles up here to let go, because they seem to be a little tense. And so I'm not pushing into her body at all. The weight of her body is on the hands, and I'm just letting the muscles know that it's okay to release and to let go and to relax, because there's a pattern here that the brain doesn't know any other position but this bit of tenseness. So we're going to wait for the brain to say it's okay to the muscles of sorts. It's really much more complex than all that, but for just making it easy to understand. Her alignment is real good, looking down. Okay, on her right side, she's starting to sink now into my fingers. And there's a lot of movement. There's a lot of fluttering, pulsing, kind of little circles that it's making on my hands. And sometimes when this happens, there'll be a big release through the body. Sometimes it doesn't, it just depends. In that Angie works on herself quite a bit and pays attention. she's probably got most of that deep tension worked out. At least the parts that are usually the jumping parts, they are deeper, but they're big when they happen. Yeah, this is doing well. And then bringing those shoulders back down a little bit. And now I'm going to put the hands over the shoulders and just let a little tiny bit of weight. It's not really even weight, it's more of an energy push. It's the same kind of thing, only the table isn't coming up to the shoulders. Now you're coaxing and waiting on the shoulders to just kind of relax out and spread a little bit and just give a little more relaxation. And there's quite a bit of movement right underneath in the palm of my hand. There's quite a bit of movement there. So there's so much that goes on when you work this kind of stuff. I mean, and the more you work it, the more you begin to understand it, and the more knowledge kind of comes to you in a way of what's happening at a deeper level. But this kind of body work is what is going to help to allow ourselves to go into a deeper, more rich and full spiritual path. And that's because you've got to have that body functioning well to have these capacities in the right place. There's way too many people right now who are functioning with a dysfunctional emotional body and a dysfunctional mental body, where the thinking seems to go, the reason seems to go, everybody bursts out in an emotion in a triggered way, and it's actually turns out to be kind of senseless, mindless, animalistic responses, because we're not in the higher mind. We're working solely on the mental body that is bringing us into the conversation of confusion, and the emotional body that's just going to tear us into the negative emotions. And it's a process, and it's a growth process. But when you start to pay attention to that kind of thing, then you'll find that it's going to deepen and enrich the rest of your life in ways. You'll still have trials and tribulations, but it becomes different. We're always going to have that force for a while that brings in stumbling stones. So the thing that we start to look at and notice in yourself when you're starting to grow in that direction is these stumbling stones become less significance into the response that you give them. You can work through them much quicker. Just maybe vent on somebody for 5 minutes and then you're over. But that's why we need each other, and to understand that we just have to work through these things that trouble us, because it's in the emotional body, and it's trying to take us away by disturbing the higher emotional processes. At least that's the way that I've been shown that it works, and it seems like other people have explained it in similar ways. So the shoulders now are so much more relaxed. The muscles have let go. The head is staying still on, pretty much on plumb. Yeah, it's right there. The rest of the body down, and the legs are still good. The turnout on the feet is good. So that little bit that we did, moving through her body, is what we needed to get that little bit of correction going. And so now with this better alignment, what I would do normally in a situation like this, if she were to come in as a session, is I would go up, and I can still kind of show you. I would do the cranial base release, because I would want to address the endocrine system just enough to get the new patterns going with this alignment. And I would give the cranial base release, which will kind of top it off. Sometimes I would do the cranial base release at first. It just depends. Somebody that's really relaxed and ready to work, you can jump into the work. Somebody that comes in is all stressed and tight and won't let go, then the cranial work is vital to do a number of those before you even get into some of this deeper work, because those people just aren't ready for it. They don't understand it, and it's like trying to, make something happen that isn't quite ready to happen. And then I also like to check the sphenoid bone. Now the sphenoid bone is where the pituitary sits, so it is vitally important for the sphenoid bone to be sure that it's balanced, because the cerebrospinal fluid kind of flutters around the hypothalamus and the pituitary and pineal, and that fluttering effect is what awakens us into deeper spiritual places. So the body is important in that regard, and yeah, there's a little tiny bit of correction happening in this sphenoid bone, but it's not much. That little torque that she had at the beginning is where the sphenoid bone is correcting. And I'm just going to give it a decompression, let it all come back in. Now what I'm doing with my hands, aside from my fingers being on the anchoring on the occiput and being on the wing of the sphenoid bone, is I'm just holding her head very, very lightly, but I'm pushing a pretty large amount of energy into her system, because I'm going deep into that, and I want to see if there's any other movements deeper in, or if the cranial, once there was a little release. I don't know if you could see her head kind of pop like that. That was a release that she made at a deep level down in kind of the back of the head and the neck, probably a little into the shoulder as well. And that was from the alignment of the sphenoid bone. So it's those little jumps like that, and that really placed her in a really good position. And I'm decompressing that sphenoid bone, and there's a lot of activity now. So there's a lot of correction, a lot of cerebrospinal fluid flowing around that brain. And here we go with it coming into the rhythm, and the rhythm is nice and smooth. It's even. It's got a good stroke to it. The rate is kind of slow because she's still in process. And her rhythm just went off, so that means she's in some kind of a little process working through either something at the emotional level, the mental level, or the physical level. Whenever the rhythm stops, the cranial rhythm stops, then you know that the body is working and there's something in the way that is being processed. So that way, when you're doing emotional work, if somebody is just shooting the breeze and not getting into their work, you can tell, because their rhythm will stay on. And I remember Dr. Upledger would, if he felt the rhythm stay on and he tried to get a person into their work and they wouldn't, and the rhythm continued to stay on, he would just tell them to get off the table and go home and not waste his time. And I didn't really understand that until I started to work it too, because I've encountered a lot of people who really don't want to get well. They say they do, but they don't. There's ulterior reasons to stay sick. So they speak that they want to be well, the body takes that in, it wants to do that, but then they don't really want to get well, so the body's confused and it'll stay sick. And so this is really balancing out well. Takes time. The temporal bones are replacing, getting into a new position. They're getting placed differently. I'm checking the rhythm. You can check it anywhere on the body. And it's good. It's back up to normal, or what her normal is. So the other thing I just wanted to say, I'll finish up with looking at her. She's in a good position. She's in a very straight position. Her shoulders look relaxed now. They are relaxed. Neck is relaxed. feet are in the proper alignment, turning out. Hip is good. It's all vector is good. So I just wanted to mention too that if you're interested in learning cranial sacral work and you just want to start to get some of the techniques down, I do have a manual on my website that I wrote a few years ago, and we are able to send you a download of different things that we've done to put it together. So if you're interested in that, just hop over there and take a look. But do be sure that you want to do it. It takes time. You have to have patience. It's a good way to develop patience. And I think patience is something that we all need. Okay, so with that, I think she's really good. I'm going to go back down and check the feet. Pushing in, it's cleaner. It has a cleaner feel. And then I'm just going to see how this lifts, and this is lifting really well. The hip is not as restricted. And there we are. That's where she wants to be. I'm pushing a lot of energy up into her system right now. Now I'm going to back that energy back out. She's doing some releasing in her foot over here, the foot that we corrected, and the toe was wiggling a little bit. She's releasing in her fingers, and it feels good. So with that, I would, call this complete. So we'll see how she felt through all of it. And like I say, this is a real session per se, but it is kind of the way that you work with it. It's different for every person.
I was prepared to go through any emotional things. I have sometimes some fear this week, or some depression that felt like it wanted to come in, and some anxiety. And then just when she was moving me some, I felt a little bit of fear coming with some of the movements. I had a few little visions. I don't know if that happens, but I saw this perfectly symmetrical face of like a wild cat. I don't know. And what that was doing in my brain was looking at symmetry, and it was moving. When she was moving me, that cat was in front of me, but he had stripes and he was just symmetrical.
You've got to understand that it's just going to take some time to trust yourself and get into your intuitive self and have the intention that you're going to help this person, whoever it is on your table, and that you want to have them find whatever it is they need to find, and get out of the way and let them do their process, and don't judge it. Don't try to put your own thoughts into what you think is going on with them. Just let it be and let it happen, and assist them and guide them along the way to their path of healing and growth. So with that, I say thank you so much. Have a really good day, and be sure to like, share, and comment. Thank you again. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for the thumbs up. And I think there's a little bell up there that you can hit that you'll get a notification every time we post. So if you want to, you can hit that too. But thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it.